All right, let's move to this next. So earlier today, early this morning, Trump released this, and it is a letter that speaks to the federalization of Alabama National Guard troops back in 1963. Why was that done, and why is he posting that? Well, one, I believe, is to signify and provide evidence that this has been done and has been done lawfully and appropriately when needed. The story behind this is in 63, the governor of Alabama, George Wallace, had blocked a couple of black students from entering the University of Alabama. It was known as the Stand in the Schoolhouse Door. It was done on June 11th. And President Kennedy at that time responded by federalizing the Alabama National Guard and leading to Wallace eventually stepping aside and allowing the students to register for classes. This was a pretty important step in desegregation. Again, why is he posting this? Well, we're gonna listen to a couple things that he had to say. Bear with me for just a moment while I bring those up. In the last few days. Now, you'll recall that last week, Pete Hegseth and President Trump addressed a group of military officials that had been brought into Quantico. And some of the things he said that day and some of the things that he said since, I think, are important for us to know and recall as the days go by. Let's go ahead. I'll pull this down and bring up one of the first things that he covered.
You in the room, we've brought back the fundamental principle that defending the homeland is the military's first and most important priority. That's what it is. Only in recent decades did politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms.
Okay. And then let's hear some further comments later in his speech.
Lincoln, Grover Cleveland, George Bush, and others all used the armed forces to keep domestic order and peace. Many of our leaders used the military to keep peace. Now they like to say, oh, you're not allowed to use the military. And you know what the people say? The people in those cities where they're being raped and shot and beat up, you know what they say? We love the military. You ever see where they interview the people on the street? I've never seen somebody say they don't, unless they're radical and paid off, because a lot of these insurrectionists are paid by, whether it's Soros or other people, but they're paid by the radical left. So today I want to thank every service member from general to private who has bravely helped us secure the nation's capital and make America safe for the American people. It's amazing. The whole world is watching.
Okay, so you heard several things there. Let's talk about them before I go and play the next piece. You talked about homeland. What is the homeland? Homeland is here. Homeland is America. And he mentions that we've come to believe that we have to be the policemen of the rest of the world, yet we never thought we'd have to protect our own country. But indeed, we appear to be facing something where there's been, I'll call it infiltration for the time being. We may choose another word in coming days and weeks, but there seems to be people working against the best interests of the country. And it's not just at the top now. We're seeing things all the way down to local level. I'm going to play something for you from Portland. You're going to watch police give advice to Antifa about how to avoid ICE.
It's okay. All right. You don't want to real quick. So the judge granted the TRO.
Hey, I'm the one who got stabbed in 2020 by you guys.
I hope he gets stabbed again.
Yeah.
Do You ain't got the balls to do it, though.
That's a death
You ain't got the balls to do it.
That's a death threat.
You ain't got the balls to do it, so keep yapping your mouth,
like
okay?
That's a death threat. Why don't you go arrest
It's
me?
harder for the judge or
You arrest
to
me
probably
for
argue
protesting in the
that,
street.
hey, we have a good reason why we actually need them. So that's why we're asking people to get out of the street.
Yes, sir, to get out of the street.
They could arrest you, but
Hey,
we're
yeah.
asking you guys voluntarily, let's just get on the sidewalks. Because if a car comes through and hits somebody, it's a better way for the government to say we need defense.
And we do definitely need the feds. We definitely need the feds in here. Because your mayor is terrible. Is giving you terrible orders. You guys should be able to work with ICE. You should be able to work with ICE.
And you could hear somebody in the background chastising the police for giving essentially advice to the Antifa folks. On one argument, you could say, well, they're trying to keep the peace, but they're actually helping them avoid ICE. And they're taking bad advice, apparently, from their leadership. Where is that going to end up? Well, we don't know. But here's a post from Nick Sorter, who was arrested last week and arraigned, but not charged. And he's reposting Donald Trump saying Chicago's mayor should be in jail for failing to protect the officers. Governor Pritzker, when you have people working against those meant to protect the populace of the cities, something is drastically wrong. Did you have a comment, Todd?
No, you're on a roll.
Okay. Okay. Now let's give me just a moment. I'm going to bring up one more thing here.
So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that.
Okay, what did he just say? If people were being killed, if courts were holding us up or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. Are those things happening? And the answer is yes. Courts are trying to stand in the way of taking illegal aliens that are in the country illegally and deporting them. They're trying to stand in the way of National Guard being deployed where they need to be, if in fact they need to be. And so he is signifying that, in fact, we might have to rely on something like that. Now, there will be those, I'm going to do a little fortune telling, I think now. There will be those that are going to say, oh, well, this is going to be a civil war. And the answer is no, it's not. This is not us against us. This is us against, funded groups that are there to foment protest, to foment violence, to create violence, to make it look like it's us versus us. And it's not. I will offer that 4 years ago, I had a conversation with some of the best election integrity folks in the country. And even at that time, part of the conversation was ultimately some of these bad guys that have created our issues in election integrity would very much prefer that we end up in a civil war and we end up taking out some of we. We as a group, we as Americans have to prevent that. That is not this fight. This fight is about folks that are working against us. And in fact, were discussed in a meeting in Washington, D.C. earlier today. I'm going to see if I can grab that. If you will take a break with me for a couple of minutes.
While you're doing that, I'm going to, some breaking news right before the show started that
Sure.
There's going to be a Gaza peace deal signed tomorrow. It looks like both sides have approved it. And the first phase, they're calling it, which will be a complete ceasefire, gradual withdrawal of the Israeli army from 70% of the Gaza Strip and simultaneous release of prisoners from both sides. So that is a plus for President Trump. We hope that goes through and we'll stay on it. Back to you.
Wonderful. Okay. As I said earlier today, there was a meeting in the White House and they talked about $100 million going through various NGOs, not just through Soros, but through Soros along with others, and it being used to fund some of what we're seeing in terms of protests and Antifa and so forth. Some people will recall that 2 years ago, maybe it was 3, there were pictures and video of Antifa yelling for, we're going to quit protesting unless we get our pay. And I've forgotten what town that was in. It was either Seattle or Portland, but I don't recall which now. But literally, these people apparently are getting paid. Let's listen in to the comments from this meeting in Washington today.
Just a story about violence and chaos, as you alluded to, Mr. President. This is a money story. And at the Government Accountability Institute, my colleague and I, Peter Schweitzer and our team, we followed the money, and we followed it to the top of what we call the protest industrial complex, RIOT INC. And we found a network of NGOs. It's not just the Soros network, the Open Society network, it's other funding networks, the Arabella funding network, the Tides funding network, Neville Roy Singham and his network, Foreign Cash. And it's also big left-wing funders. Some of them are not citizens of this country. Mr. Hans-Jörg Wyss of Switzerland. They're pouring money into this entire ecosystem. And so I want to share 3 money facts with you about what we call RIOT INC. Number 1, like any corporation, RIOT INC has many divisions. It doesn't just have the Antifa boots on the ground division. It has PR divisions. It has marketing divisions. It has a very well-funded legal division to get these boots on the ground back on the streets as quickly as possible. But it does have those investors that I mentioned. Number 2, we have identified dozens of radical organizations, not just the decentralized Antifa organizations, but dozens of radical organizations that have received more than $100 million from the RIOT INC investors. These would be the lawyer groups. These would be the groups that advocate for calling good, honest Americans fascists, etc. And then 3, I think the most shocking thing is that we have found that more than $100 million in U.S. taxpayer funding has flowed into these funding networks, including at least $4 million to these very groups themselves, not just Antifa types, but there was an event in Atlanta called Stop Cop City. Over 60 rioters were charged with domestic terrorism. These groups received money for that from both the billionaire class as well as taxpayer money. So one other thing, this money helps fund the decentralized crowdfunding platforms. These are ways that Antifa, the John Brown Gun Club of Elm Fork, which had links to that attack on the ICE facility, the Socialist Rifle Association, and just because they don't have LLCs or EIN numbers doesn't mean they can't get paid. Some of these funding platforms, crowdfunding platforms, are funded by this network that we call RIOT INC. So, again, I want to thank you for your leadership, for the whole cabinet's leadership on this. We're going to keep following the money and appreciate everything you're doing, sir.
Do you know the name of any of the funders? Do you know the names? Because if you do, I'd like you to give them to Cash or Pam.
Absolutely.
Or Christy.
Yeah, we'll do that.
As soon as you can. That's all of you. Because you probably know the names after a certain period of time. You tend to find out. But these are people that do not have good intention for the country, and that's treasonous probably. So if you could, very important, if you could do that, it would be great. Nobody would know better than you. You'll figure it out.
So after going through what we talked about just a moment ago, I found it to provide incredibly good closure in terms of this is not us against us. This is us against a machine that has been created to create these protests. So when we see these going on, we understand now, or can understand, that this is something that needs to be fought. This is not us against kids that are good American kids. These folks are being paid for, and they are being incented to go create these protests. That's why it is so critical that they be stopped. People who've gotten hurt in the past, they're getting hurt now. It doesn't have to continue. And if Trump has to take very precise action to shut this down, then that probably is what needs to be done. Okay.
Let me jump in there. There's what strikes me, Bill, is the movement. The Overton window has shifted. Trump used some words there, which a year or two ago we would have been shocked if he used. One of them was treason. He said that very clearly. I think we're to the point where we're looking, as you said, at this insurrection, and we're going to call it what it is. I mean, that's huge movement from a year ago. And there's also a lot of military pushback from the bad guys, as you say, inside DOW now. We're dealing with this, and we're going to deal with it next week with Pete Blaber on Ukraine SITREP. But a lot of these flag officers were not happy with Trump's push to basically protect the homeland, as you say. So
Right.
we're gonna beyond this. It's on CDM. It's an important issue. Back to you.
All right. One more thing before we move on from this notion of what do we have to do? What do we have to be prepared for in order to see this, these fake groups that are being incented to create these problems dealt with appropriately? Well, let's recall that even if, and we're not saying that he's even going to go there, but just even if Trump needed to deploy National Guard or even military to certain locations to deal with something, it would not be the first time that this has had to happen. If we go back to 1992, during the riots that followed the Rodney King verdict, U.S. Marines, if you recall, were actually deployed in Los Angeles. And that was done by George H.W. Bush, and he invoked the Insurrection Act. So this is not unknown in the past. And it does not mean it's not, we're not moving away from America. But in certain cases, when things get bad enough, certain actions might need to be taken. We're not going to foreshadow what will or will not happen as we sit here tonight. However, it is important to remember that these things in the past have been done and things moved back toward proper order after certain actions were taken. If that's the way it has to go, so be it. But we'll keep that in abeyance for the moment, but keep thinking about the way we started this show. We have to know who we are, and we have to know who the enemy is. And what we've learned in the last half hour gives a much better picture of who the enemies may actually be. And it isn't us. Okay.